And welcome back to another video, fellas. Today we're going to be changing the valve cover gasket and that motor mount on the Nissan Altima. First thing you got to do is, because we're going to be taking out the mount and we have to take out part of this supporting bracket for this other mount to have access to the valve cover, you want to support the engine. So jack your car up, or if you have a setup like mine, use the ramp and put a jack underneath the engine with a board to support the engine so that it doesn't drop when you're releasing it, undoing these bolts, okay? Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start taking off all the wiring, the wire harness that is gonna be in the way. We have to get that out of the way. Gotta remove these hoses. Gotta remove obviously this and this and this and probably this to get to that bolt. So let's get it. First thing I'm gonna do is disconnect the battery. You need a 10mm wrench. Disconnect the negative. Reason why is because you're gonna be disconnected the harness, and this harness comes all the way to the alternator, and this thing is a live wire. This 12 volt constant. So because of that reason, you want to disconnect the battery. That way you don't arc out when you're removing this bolt, this nut, this fitting. All right, guys, I got part of the harness all ready to be moved out of the way, but I got to get to the injectors. They're back there to the plugs. I got this one off and this one off, but I have to get to the clips to hold the wire harness in place, and I got to get to those two injectors on that side. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this to open up some room for that. But coils, these two grounds, the alternator, this other sensor, I think it's a cam sensor, and that gives, and you have to release these tabs. You got to squeeze and pull. Same thing here, squeeze and pull, and they come right out. It's gonna be challenging back there though. It's uncomfortable. There's barely any room, but you can get it. Needle nose pliers, long screwdrivers, stuff like this, hooks, needle nose pliers, again long ones. I got these special wrenches that work for these. You don't need them, but it's good to have. Stuff like this, good to have. Anyway, I'm gonna continue moving forward. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this and this. 18mm, 14mm. Some of these bolts are 14. These are 18. Hey guys, got this mount off. That's the way it looks. The nut that goes on here, I dropped somewhere. I gotta find it. But that's 18mm. These are 16mm. I know I said before they were 18, but no, what I meant to say was this one is 18. These one are 16. They're different lengths, so I would advise you to just keep it together like this, so that way you don't get it mixed up. And then the same thing with that bracket. I'm gonna leave the bolts right in the same place as I remove it. Those are 14 I mentioned before. Let's get it. All right, guys, another thing you have to remove before, in order to get all this part out, after you remove all the bolts, don't forget you got to do this one, because that's attached to this. So then in order to get to that bolt, you got to remove this out of the way. This little tab right here, you got to push back as you're pulling this reservoir up. That black piece, that's what locks it in place. It locks right on top of here, and that gives you enough room to be able to get to the bolt with a ratchet, and then with one of these, an open end or ratchet like this one, to get to the bolt. Okay, it's simple, easy. You don't have to go crazy with this. But then and as you're doing that, the engine might move on you a little bit, okay? And then to get the bolt out, I had to push on the engine that way to be able to get the bolt out, because it came this way as I was removing the bolt. The engine starts moving because that's part of the motor mount. There's two of them, and the other one is one in the back, and then another one is the transmission mount. But as long as you got the engine support, it's not going to drop on you. Anyway, guys, moving forward, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this. There it is, guys. The bolts are still in the same place where they were. That's the way it's looking. I'm gonna go ahead and keep everything together. Bolts in the same place. Now you can remove this, get that out of the way. And you can go ahead and inspect this older mount, make sure it's in good shape. Not sure, seems a little loose to me, but anyway. I got more room to get to the injector on this side, and then that one. Remove the cap, so it's not in the way, gives you more room. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and work on that. Guys, in order to get that bolt out, it doesn't just come out like, you get it loose, and once it starts coming out, it hits right here. And then you get it to where it's almost out, but it's still hitting no matter what you do. So you have to loosen up these bolts and pry on this some as you're trying to get the bolt out, and it comes out. Okay? Loosen these up and then pry this up as you're trying to move the bolt out of the way, because it hits right here. All right, guys, so I got the coils out. This one was wet with oil. That means that seal was leaking. So not only did we have a leak out here, we had a leak inside. So I'm glad I'm doing this. So I got the coils out. That's 10mm heads, bolts that holds it in place. The plugs were already removed. I'm gonna try to remove the cover, the valve cover, and slide it out from underneath this, because I'm having some difficulty removing the plugs. Well, I got some of the injector plugs removed, but these clips, without breaking them, I really can't get in there and squeeze underneath and then take it out. I'm not trying to break them. So I'm gonna see if I can squeeze the cover in that direction from underneath the harness. If that doesn't work, then I guess I'll have to continue working on those. All right, guys, exactly how I did it. I just squeeze from underneath the harness. You got to make sure that if it's dirty like this, either clean it or make sure you don't drop anything inside the engine. I cleaned around the edges a little bit, like this edges, to make sure nothing went in the engine. If you got a pressurized air or something, just blow it out before you remove it. But as you can see, I did it. You don't have to remove all those injector plugs. Just take your time, pry it up with a tool like this one, a prying tool or a screwdriver, and make sure don't get too deep into where you're going to damage where the seal sits. Just pry it up nice and easy, go around it till you get it up, and then if you're able to squeeze your fingers underneath it, start prying on it with your fingers, and you work it out. It's doable. All right, the day is over for today. We're going to continue on tomorrow or whenever we got time. It's getting dark. All right, guys, so I cleaned it as best as I could. If you look inside this hole, it's full of oil, right? So I got to get rid of that oil. That one's dry, that one's dry, and that one has oil. I can take the spark plug out. It's gonna get all dirty. I have to clean it, and the oil can drop on the cylinders. There's not a lot of oil. I don't think it's gonna harm anything. But before I do that, I'm gonna try to stick a paper towel or a towel, one of these or a paper one, and just try to soak up as much oil as I can. So that's less oil going to the cylinder once I take out the spark plug. But it's not a big deal, fellas. A little bit of oil in the cylinder is not gonna do much harm. If it's a lot, it can hydrolock your engine, so be very careful. That's why I'm gonna try to get some of the oil out, and whatever little bit stays in there and it drops in the cylinder, I'm not gonna be too worried about it. But I gotta get it out. So if you got the same situation, get it out. When you're cleaning it, start with maybe with a wire brush or a rag and clean away from the engine. Go away from it, nice and easy. Very careful not to get the dirt inside where the oil is, because that could be a problem later on. If you get a little bit, it's not a big deal, not the end of the world, but try not to drop anything in there. Get it as clean as you can without damaging the surface where the gasket's gonna sit. Okay, you can use a wire brush, you can use not sandpaper, but material like this. wire brush, a screwdriver with the rag on the tip, or with this at the tip to scrub it. And take your time. Like I said, you don't want to damage the meeting surfaces. Okay guys, this is the valve cover I got through Amazon. It comes with the bolts, it comes with the cap, it comes with a new PVC valve, and it comes with the gasket, plus the ones that go on the spark plug holes. It's amazing. Maybe I paid $60 for this. It's a lot for the money, right? So anyway, before we get started, after you clean everything up, you want to put silicone here, in the back, right in that corner, and same there. Silicone on there, then put the valve cover on. And the reason why is because this is where this and this meet. And you want to, even though the gasket sits right there, you want to make sure that it has another source of a seal, like a gasket maker, like a silicone, blue silicone, red silicone, whatever it is that you want to use, right in those corners, all right? Because that's where those two pieces meet. Let's get it. Another thing that I did, guys, on the tubes, since they're gonna go through each seal, and you don't want to rip the seals or damage them in any way, you can use either engine oil or grease, put it around the top of the hole, just smear it around and the top like this. That way when you put the valve cover in, it slips right in and nothing gets damaged. You just want to prevent anything from damaging, right? So try that. I got the silicone on and I'm ready to put in silicone right in the corners like we talked about. There it is, guys. All the bolts work perfectly the way they're supposed to. There is a sequence and there's a torque specs for this kind of stuff. You need to look it up. I didn't look it up. These bolts are the old ones. They're shoulder bolts. So it's gonna thread all the way up to here and it's gonna stop. You're gonna feel it. If you know that it's tight enough, then leave it alone. If it's too tight, well, you're gonna break it or strip it, right? So you can look it up or you can go ahead and tighten it as far as it goes. But do start in the center. Like work your way from the center bolts and go crisscross like this and work yourself out that way and then out that way. And that's it. And then come around and double check everything. But anyway, to be sure, you can go ahead and look it up. Look at the bolt pattern and the torque specs, and then you be the judge of that. I'm not doing it. I'm just gonna go as tight as I know that it should be. When it stops, and I'm gonna follow that sequence. I'm gonna go in the center and then work my way out that way and that way. So that's what I'm doing. Okay, I checked all of them. They're nice and snug. If any of you know the torque spec or the sequence that I talked about, please go ahead and leave it in the comments for the rest of you guys to read. I appreciate that. Now I'm gonna move on, guys. I ordered this motor mount since I was here. I think it's loose. Not supposed to be here, and I got it in, so I'm gonna start working on that. I have it right here. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the other one, and all it has is 3 bolts. 2 and 3. 1, 2, and 3. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that and then put the new one in. All right, guys, I got the motor mount removed, and I'm gonna give you some tips on what you need to do, and it's definitely remove this guy right here, the reservoir for the coolant. It sits right in here like so. It has 1 screw. Remove the screw and it comes off. Put it to the side. Careful not to break the nipple on the plastic of the radiator. This thing sits right in here. That part right there slips on that, and it has the 1 bolt, the 1 screw. It's a 10mm head, and then you're able to wiggle yourself out of here with the motor mount. Now I'm gonna go ahead and place it, screw it down, and then put this reservoir back on. And there it is, guys. You do have to move this thing around and move this thing around to get it. Or you can make your life easier and just remove the hose off the power steering reservoir, and then you have all the room in the world. I worked it through it and forced this out as much as I could to get this leg under it, and also undid the clip for the line, so it'll give me some wiggle room. I got it now. Insert that bad boy back in, and that's it. Line up the bolts and we're good. All right guys, that is bolted all the way down, and this one is in place, but as you can see, we're way off from the center of the bolt. So this one is in place, but it's not bolted down, so I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this up, and then I'm gonna have to figure out a way of pushing the engine that way so I can line up the bolt right through there. But the whole engine has to move in that direction. Guys, again, I mentioned this before, but this plate, you have to remove these bolts, this one and this one, and you have to pry on this as high as you can go so you can put this bolt in. It's gonna hit here, as you can tell when I was taking it out. It's thin, but they bend it a little bit. Not a big deal, but you're gonna have to force it. You basically have to force it in, even by prying this. You gotta wiggle it, you gotta find a way in, but it's doable. I did it, and if I did it, you can do it too. So I'm gonna go ahead and bolt this down and then push the engine forward, and then I'll let you know how I did that. All right guys, that's in. And the way that I ended up pushing the motor is by putting a bar here. I tried with a screwdriver, with a big screwdriver, and it was working. But then since I got one of these pry bar, put it right there against between that bracket and the other mount that I just put in. And with that, you can wiggle the engine. It's not gonna move now because it's bolted down, but this is a good spot. You're not damaging anything. And you might have to use the jack to make it come up, to line up the height, and then push back with this, with a bar like this, or a screwdriver, if you got a big screwdriver to stick in there. And that should work for you guys. Easy. All right, guys, the valve cover is finished. All these parts right here are done, all the mounts, everything is nice and tight. The electrical is in place except for the coils. So this video is over, guys. I'm gonna move on with, I'm gonna take the spark plugs out, make sure I finish cleaning the oil that I showed you guys that was in the tubes. Clean that, check the spark plugs, clean them, and then put everything back together. And another thing, guys, the hose that goes from here to here, too brittle to reuse. I tried reusing it and it just breaks. It's just done. I gotta get a new hose. So the video is over, guys. If you learned anything, please like the video, subscribe is free, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you.